Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's talk. Rise of a new mankind, of a new mind. Rise of a new mind. And so I would like to speak about something that has come into more of a clear focus for me. I have been under the impression it's been for some time now that it has become more crystallized that really consciousness finds itself maneuvering and navigating and in some sense piloting through various programs and various programs of nature. I consider the moment has an objective component and a subjective component, hence an objective self and a subjective self, hence the objective realm and the subjective realm. The objective realm is a program of nature. It is beyond the will of the man. But the subjective realm is a conscious program of nature. Literally, it's as if it's a program we can move in. That's free will. The man looking in the mirror found himself to be the source of his own existence. Really, what it is that the new mind of our species, if there is a suggestion that there will come a sort of evolution of not just an objective significance but a subjective significance. That in the programs of nature, the programs of culture, the programs of language, and various other storylines that are weaved in the psyche of the person, interweaved into the psyche of the person. Ah. The emergence of a new acknowledgement of the attention that is being the whole moment. That's what's going to happen, I find. And I find really we are existing through various programs. These programs, some of them are ancient, they're sculpted by ancient hands, and some of these programs are sculpted by modern hands. Really, because human beings, it's like a bunch of creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere simulating significance upon a reality that is changing all the time. We all know that the cells of the biological body change every 2 weeks. Of course, the cells of the brain may take years, as certain scientists suggest. But what it is that the biological body is changing. Like you from 15 years ago, 10 years ago, you have a completely different body, physical, biological body, as if the cells are not the same cells as 15 years ago. So if the biology has changed, and if the subjectivity was getting its value from its biological position, so what it really means is that our identities are hovering in the void. It means that really the inner realm is creating an outer realm to consider a sort of non loneliness in its existential dynamic. I'm telling you, consciousness is a reaction to emptiness. The spiritual, or let us say the mystical riddle that has, in some sense, fascinated humanity is how in a room The relationship of the space with the furniture in the room, the relationship of the content of the conscious moment which appears existential with the experiential presence of the moment, a reemergence of a new roar of the mind. Your experience becomes your leader. They say the mind is a lousy master but a great servant. Guess what? When the world is set into stories, the mind tries to own the story. It tries to make truth out of nothing. And when I say make truth out of nothing, it's like an ultimate creative permission. You see the programs of nature where I'll give you an example. Right now, if I want this cup of coffee to levitate and just come to the air and just automatically come to my lips and I drink the coffee without me touching it, it's like that is improbable. Like that's not going to happen. But in the program of nature, which is my subjective realm, I can close my eyes and envision 10,000 cups lifting into the sky. You know? So what I'm saying is there's a freedom to a program that one is their experience finds themselves in. You see, I realize that it's not just human beings should be considerate of travel and navigation. I hope I'm alive to see the day where all the airlines are like, what the heck? Let's just make this all free. I don't know if it's gonna happen, but like that. But what I mean is that there comes a permission for the human being in one lifetime to travel into many external spaces. Now there's many people, there's many tourist guides in the world, you can say, that can explain to you different locations, external locations. But you can say Mr. Within is attempting to be the first internal tourist guide, internal tour guide. Do you know? What is behind your eyes is a moment that is causing reality. What is in front of your eyes is a moment that is being the effect of what is caused. And the cause and effect are like lovers holding hands. Do you know? I simply find that we cannot avoid the fact that we are conscious creatures, that 1/3 of the human being's life is spent to being asleep. Literally, you're sleeping 1/3 of your life. You can say in the other 2/3 of your life, maybe there's a lot of mobile activity. You're just moving around like 1/3. So 1/3 you're asleep, 1/3 you're just mobility. And let's say you have 1/3 where you truly get. So 1/3 of your lifetime, you have an opportunity to, in some sense, wonder about the truth of the moment. The concept of truth, it has been reduced. It's as if like I opened my eyes in the world and I'm like, oh my God, they're bullying truth. They're bullying the archetype, the concept. They're bullying the ideological position of the unknown. What that means is any man who dares put his hand into the unknown must be able to beforehand be unknown himself. That's the way you navigate into the unknown. You cannot go as a known phenomena, because that known phenomena, any moment it comes into a subjectively considered environment, the concept, I don't want to say mutates, but expands. It shifts. You see, for me, I notice there's a sort of surfing. I like the verb piloting. The pilot is the ultimate, um, uh, in Mr. Within eyes, the ultimate, what is it, ad spiritus symbol. Like it's, for me, spirituality was never about heaven. I respect heaven, I respect design, but the conscious program of nature that man finds himself in That one third of life he has to in the conscious waking state wondering about it. And guess what? When the child has opened its eyes in the world, even though life seems like a dream, people are telling you, follow your dreams, kid. While you're dreaming, also follow your dreams in that dream. It's great. We're having Inception kind of Inception like Inception movie like motivations. For me, reality is all about how attention opens to the moment. Imagine how you enter the room, and imagine in that room there's 8 billion people, okay, waiting for you in a room. Right now, imagine you're a human being who you're about to step in a room, whether you know it or not, that you're going to step into a room where there's 8 billion people who are going to see your presence. And what that means is this 8 billion people is actually spheres of mind which ultimately relate to one another in a field. So what that means is it's um bodies communicate through duality, minds communicate through non-duality, which is another way of saying an oscillation between the field and the void. You can say the void is a field. Who knows? Emptiness could be containing all of this. But who knows? All this whole universe of ours could be inside a sun. I have this. You gotta wait until the book comes out, but it's called God-like Spheres. It's a book I'm publishing. Nature is a movement. Humanity is a conscious natural movement. This conscious natural movement has observed objective phenomena. The moment it did, it could start using it. The moment we knew we were separate from that hammer, we could hold the hammer and start using it. You know? Now, similarly, Mr. Within is saying the species is evolving from primitive language worship into unknown collective observance of language. We are reaching a point in our history as a civilization where our relationship with language is going to become similar to our relationships with objects. What that means is we're going to see that it is a primary presence of attention that imbues a space of position for that even position to be animate. You can say the mind is a story generator, and sometimes it generates stories that don't make sense. The moments of your life where chaos or some sort of meaninglessness, wave of meaninglessness hits the person, this can happen, especially as civilization becomes more mechanical. It's a symptom. The natural being is going to feel guilty. You know why? There's two types of guilt, guys. There's the guilt of not being able to perform as advanced as the machine, and the guilt of, in some sense, being forgotten by nature. I choose to entertain this beautiful metaphor that really technology is the bird that flew from the nest. That really the mindsets that led to any sort of technological innovation were individual positions, and in a response to their wonder, that was the feedback they got. For me, what it is right now, we are so objectively oriented as creatures. When we become truly subjectively oriented as creatures, you will suddenly notice an instant, no longer language dictates meaning. your attention, your experiential attention imbues meaning in phenomenology. So really, when you get to know how the attention is standing, you realize you have always been standing. That's how life happens. The mystics and yogis called it a divine remembrance. Pretty much the yogi wasn't just there to do like, you know, just hatha yoga and various kind of like practices and poses of sort of kind of opening up the flows and channels of the body. But at the same time, it's like it wasn't just performance. It was a performance that was, and at first arose as an intuitive nostalgia. So your conscience doesn't, it's sometimes it may be like the voice of somebody who told you so you shouldn't do something, but sometimes your conscience in some sense becomes your mind communicates to you. Think of it in this way, as a concept in a conceivable way, and as the context where the concept arises in meaning. So really what I'm saying is that rather than man and the philosophers of the next generations kind of in some sense being stuck down on being like, oh gosh, is man the empty page, is man the pen, is man the fingers holding the pen, is man the ink on the page, and eventually we realize it's as if we are all. It's like we are as much. Any time in your life when something leaves, anything that leaves, it in some sense opens up space. When you realize, Alex, there's a great story. I mean, it's not a story, but there's this thing that they say when Alexander the Great died. The tradition was he was put on a burning boat, and Alexander the Great intentionally had asked that his arms be open, as if as he's kind of like lying down, his corpse is lying down, in his will he wanted his hands to be open as he's going. And many people of the city and many of the children of the city were like, why was his arms open, why? And then eventually it is revealed, because even Alexander the Great, he conquered like many levels of reality. But he realized at the end, even he is going empty handed. You see, there's a sort of ability to acknowledge the moment that snaps you out of any sort of ideological phenomenology defining. So the only way you can actually really be able to be aware of your subjective realm is by realizing you're not it. Because the moment you think you're something, you're bound by it. Think of it this way. It's not just the laws of the universe that limit phenomenology on the surface of the earth, but it is also the law of a certain idea which holds within it a subtle design that dictates, literally becomes an axis to the moment. So what it is I can tell you that it's kind of like Heraclitus kind of took our attention there. He says, no man steps in the same river twice, and it is not the same man, and it is not the same river. What he means is it's as if you are either one person experiencing one lifetime or endless senses of self in different moments. Endless ideologies you entertained as yourself. Just like the teddy bear looked at just like the child looked at the teddy bear and was suddenly saw that teddy bear as real and its best friend. Similarly, man is doing that with language, and he's thinking he is the language. What we really are is actually the starting ground is an unknown position. That means we expect the world to be like a playground, but we're realizing it is actually a battlefield. So evolution started from savage levels of animalistic behavior. We had to step out of the food chain. But after we stepped out of the food chain, then there was less external activity. So that external activity required inner compensation. So you can say the animal that was like shouting and being animalistic and savage, when it stopped, it's not that intensity went away. Just like how energy cannot be created or destroyed, it just changes. Similarly, it was as if the intensity of the savage animal became an open mind. This is why there is a sort of residue of animalistic instincts in any sort of subjective projection of the human being, because it's kind of like, how can I tell you? Nature has opened its eyes first, then man. And when man forgets this viewpoint, he makes himself the center of the living world, which becomes an ultimate blind spot. You see, I understand that we have to take care of ourselves as human beings. Like this was kind of like made clear to me in the mentality of ancient, you know, cultures, that these people, they literally, they were so grateful for civility that it was a paradise just for them to be here. It's kind of like you see this, like I remember seeing this documentary, this child in, I don't know what country he was, but he was in a poverty stricken country in Africa. And um, what happens is, this child is taken to MIT, and this child built a radio on his own. And this child attempted to innovate in his environment. And literally the universe opened doors, and MIT professors were like, yo, kid, come into this lab and play. You know? You know? So the thing is that it's life is too alive beyond description. I think that change is an obvious direction of life. So really, we have to kind of treat our inner realms like Heraclitus said. It's like different senses of self in different moments. But in front of your eyes, you are one being. We need the individuality for human civilization. An advanced civilization can be defined as a civilization that is conscious of its individual position, it's conscious on a micro level, and it's also conscious on a macro level. So what does that mean? That means not only the human being has an ability to be an individual, it's like not only your individuality gets maximized, but in some sense it becomes your individual. As your individuality is maximized, it's like, this is why they say those with the biggest egos, sometimes they get the biggest realizations in life. The savage fool, sometimes gently an apocalypse occurs. I call these gentle apocalypse. It's like, how can an apocalypse be gentle, if you treat it nice? The mind is playful, of course. We got to realize language is a technology we're using. This is something that in any moment that I give any sort of talk, or anytime I speak, anytime emotions occur. So you see, like this is the fascinating thing in life. It's like waves. Our psychology is not static. The brain can't just be seen as the movement of particles. It can be seen as a liquid in a container. Now, even though that is a movement of particles, but I'm saying if you see it through that analogy, you'll kind of realize that balance is required before experimentation. It's kind of like the scientists being so excited to see the experiment result, only to realize that they're wanting to see a certain result limited the experiment. So really, it doesn't matter what kind of external findings there comes about. It's there's an internal translation of it into some sort of subjective significance for the human being, in which the idea appears. I've had many moments in my life that I've suddenly snapped out of those moments. When I snapped out of those moments, at first I felt I was forgetting myself. It was this sort of kind of like, let me tell you, it's a sort of, when I was younger, I was afraid of the void. And there is a level of fear that will manifest when the true void is experienced. So I'm not saying that it's like it's a state beyond fear. I'm just saying that the fear is seen to be natural as well. There is a contentment with the journey or in the moment. That contentment of journeying is, believe it or not, an ultimate value. So a civilization that can move as a collective and also be individual means it's kind of like, imagine all those birds in the sky rhythmically moving. Now instead of birds, imagine it's 8 billion minds. Now these 8 billion minds aren't flying, but they are in some sense on the same surface of the earth. Every moment, every moment there comes a sort of containment of self. Really, how you contain yourself in the moment is your ego in that moment. It is literally the ideas, it's literally how much the attention is fragmented. Anytime the concept of ego, like literally what ego means is fragmented attention. There is a division. A dualistic truth is considered before a non dualistic one. So all conclusions on non duality lead back to duality. It's kind of like the white chess pieces that go first. The other chess pieces, in some sense, how can I tell you? Species are on the same chessboard. Species are functioning and going in abidance to their ecosystems. They're not just going in accordance to their ecosystem, especially with the Homo sapien. From a technical approach, it's how can I tell you? It's like in man broke his mind and accidentally discovered infinity. He dwelled in infinity until he realized that there was nowhere else to go other than to fix the mind. And speaking about this in a sort of, in quotations, for the transmigrating soul, really it's attention games. It's attention. Attention moves beyond language. And I feel it's going to be some sort of experiential integration. That means, like, what is happening with social media? What is happening with globalization? Why are we suddenly in a situation where it's like the planet has a certain space, and in some sense the numbers of minds emerging on the planet, I kind of feel it's strange, but it's as if so many people are praying for a better tomorrow only to realize that that is why endless minds are evoking. We are creating a need, for, I mean, it's like a person who really thinks he has a problem, you know and struggles for a long time. Suddenly when they snap out of that problem, it's like the solution is heavy, intense. Okay, excuse me guys, I'm going to continue. I'm simply inspired to talk about the title, The Rise of a New Mind, guys. To be honest, the reason of it is because I simply consider where else can the species go. Really, when you consider life from a design view, there's shifts. So how can I tell you if I ask you what is the purpose of life, for most people the answer is just continuity. Now you ask them why are you continuing life and they're like self gratification because the self is the only thing there is, man. It's like if I give my lifetime living for the civilization, in some sense I'm being a martyr of my own inner life. And I will tell you, we have it's a cool time because for the first time in human history, man does not need to defend himself against savage animalistic movements. But in some sense, man has to defend himself now from very soon to be savage technological movements. It's like we don't realize there's something that Ray Kurzweil said that I think for most people it went through one ear and went out through the other. And he said that technology is accelerating and evolving exponentially. What does that mean? That means our creation is running faster than the creator. Imagine as if God created man, and before God could give man an instruction, man already started running towards some sort of design oriented nature. Every species requires its toy. Every civilization in history has opened its eyes and declared that this world is for it. We have made the center, we don't realize it, but really the word selfishness only exists because reality is centered around this. It's like the self is the center of your reality. Now, when you can experience a moment of life when it moves just a tiny percentage beyond that self, you suddenly experience a non dual moment. That non dual moment is samadhi. So, what I mean by that is it's a realization that just the simplicity of consciousness to existence is so fascinating and just unknown that it becomes blissful. It's the bliss that arises from not knowing. It's strange. Some people will say, "How can you feel blissful? How can isn't ignorance kinda? How can ignorance be bliss?" Sorry, how is it that ignorance is bliss? It's not about changing the world, guys. The world is already changing. It's changing beyond our even computational ability as human beings, especially with the introduction of advanced technologies like AI in the year 2050, as Ray Kurzweil says. Superintelligence. There's a book called Superintelligence by Niels Bostrom for the people who are fascinated in the technical approach towards the kind of future development of superintelligence. They should read this book, Superintelligence, Neil Bostrom. Every moment in history has reacted to its image. Now we are reaching a point where we're like, okay, we have minds. It's like what's the point of finding a mind if you don't know, in some sense, what it is? So it's like some people you look at them, they're like, oh my God, that person has lost their mind. That angry person has lost their mind. They don't have a state of mind, conscious mind in the moment. Their conscious mind is lost, either kind of thrown into the turmoils of the past or a future fear or desires manipulating the tension in the moment. You know, I wondered, there was a time where I thought, what would make my grandfather proud when I was young? And I realized I had to ask myself what would make my grandfather's grandfather proud. And then I eventually saw the task of the new generation is simply to evoke novelty. That means if you live a life where you're repeating everything, if you're not doing anything new in it, in that life, you are not living actually. You're existing in past programs of comfort. I am telling you, life is not about comfort. The word comfort should be just dismantled. It should just be eradicated from the dictionary. So no longer we're uncomfortable. Napoleon, he says impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary, and then he went and conquered an empire, guys. You see? Language has an incredible influence on how we function as creatures. I found it to somebody once said that the best book to read is the one that you're going to write. And I find this to be ultimately true. This is a kind of blessed allowance of the writing realm. That means a writer doesn't just experience. It's not just like that sentence is an artwork, is a sort of design with geometry. It's just that sentence can be seen from many angles through time. Really, two options is either the world adjusts to you or you adjust to the world. Externally, you have to adjust to the world. There's no other option, unfortunately. You have to survive regardless of how much people talk about metaphysical ideology, or how much like a person just talks about the mind. Regardless of our fascination of our mind, we're not that fascinated to ignore the objectivity. I'm not, even though I'm speaking about how the mind is unknown, but I'm not saying it's like there's no point of also reducing everything to the unknown. It's not even about it's like after the person is balanced, it's like then what? Life eventually changes to a point where what's the point of balance? But what I mean by that is that it's kind of like your mind becomes when I say your mind, I mean your whole moment of being can accept itself as itself. A sort of spatial agreement of intelligence with the moment. I don't know how to say this. Really, it can't even be worded. When I wondered what fascinates me, I realized it is a question that no human mind has ever looked at. There was something about finding the new that makes the value of life kind of, it makes life redeem itself. You see, what is life, guys? What is this nature program of nature? As if just like you change the channel and you're seeing like Animal Planet, guess what? It's like the eyes have opened and we're seeing Animal Planet, you know? A planet with evolving creatures on it. These evolving creatures have come to the consideration of like we have a sort of linguistic sophistication. That means on some level, sure, it's just mouth noises traveling, sounds traveling, and in some sense being received by other intelligent um, minds. The thing is that the inner realm, it has been forgotten. I found a sort of strange thing that science was felt it had championed heresy, but I realize any restriction of any sort of ideology is a limit. So what that means is, I wondered why in politics they say the freedom fighter who defeats the kind of tyrant eventually becomes a tyrant himself. I wondered, why does this happen? And I realized because it's a step in a certain archetype that is not meant for the human idea. There is no human being that should waste their time trying to see guys, here's the thing about life. We assume we try to climb the mountain by starting at the top. So what I mean by that is that if civilization was its greatest potential, that means if you can right now in this moment envision your greatest self, just any sort of image that comes to your mind when you think, just consider in the moment, all right, what would be the greatest sense of self that I could experience? Now when you wonder about that, and I want you to imagine now, what is the greatest state the whole cosmos could be? If the problem is big, the answer is most likely small. If the problem is small, the answer is most likely big. The law of duality is fundamental to psychological existence. We can't even have the word psyche if there is not a separation from the phenomena. Really, what it is the mind, the idea of the mind is truly a mask on a moment of being that is oscillating between a sort of simultaneous all phenomenology being and then suddenly a unique wave on the surface of this ocean. So it's like, who said humanity stopped evolving, you know? We realize evolution really didn't have to do with the thoughts of the human being, it had to do with the environments it existed in. Really, that was evolution, was it not? It's like you can even blame it. It's like, forget about what caused evolution, it's like the environment. How can you separate the creature's behavior from the environment's behavior which the creature finds itself? In other words, the scientist trying to fathom a world where the laws of the universe don't apply. When the laws of the universe don't apply, you see, it's like you can say religion um, was a sort of initial attempt at, it was the first time man saw himself in the inconceivable everything. And that was a moment where, of course, man couldn't say. It's as if, like, the ego couldn't say that it created God. So the ego, in some sense, pushes itself into the subconscious, and the person may just think a certain ideology in the moment is valid. Life is not a photo. Life is such a dynamic film that just stick around to see how the party goes. Great minds, they entertain the whole moment. That means it's like, it doesn't matter what sort of objective phenomenology is in my moment of awareness. That's when I say you start experiencing life as a mind projecting a body, which means the free will acknowledges its creative endless ability from the unknown. The laws of gravity do not apply in your subjective realms. I can throw an object right now in the room, it's going to fall down on the ground, but in my mind, the object could just keep hovering in the air. Just my subjective duplicate version of the moment now. It's like you can say imagination is the birth of a parallel reality. So you can say it's either reality is divided, and that's how imagination came, or in some sense, something divided it. Either self defined the world, defined the awareness, or the awareness defined the self. It honestly shifts. That means it's hilarious, guys. Don't take language too seriously, because um, the alphabet could have been any other symbol. The letter A could have had, you know, more lines in it. So what I mean is that we are giving value. Value originates in a moment of present attention. This moment of present attention is aware of its objective realm. Now, because it acknowledges its objective realm, it is content and comfortable with the objective way reality is. Then life can truly be studied. The mind can be wondered about. So the rise of a new mind is really the rise of a new human vision. That means literally the eyes that are looking out, that are looking in the mirror. Like imagine if you saw yourself in the mirror and you just gave a high five to yourself on the mirror. In that moment, it's as if what is aware, what is here, it doesn't need to be defined because it has to be here before the definition can be imposed. That's how subtle true experience is. And it may seem chaotic. What I'm saying is kind of like we thought science fiction was a long time, like, it's far away, but I'm telling you, reality can change. We're becoming conscious beyond the storylines that govern our experience. And you have to have a freedom is a crucial idea. I can say that my relationship with the concept of freedom, as I've ran laps around the sun throughout my life so far, it's the concept of freedom has changed in incredible ways. Sometimes the freedom was based on a sort of inability or ability to respond in an external environment, to the in an objective situation. And then there was also certain sorts of freedom or lack of freedom that I would experience in my inner reality. For example, when I was younger, I didn't realize this until years later, that the kind of environment I was, that every human being you can say is born with a certain nature. And that nature, its grace, is based really on how much that being trusts where it is. So when imagine creatures just opening their eyes in the world and trusting it, a lot of children smiling, at this at the sun, at the in the sunshine. But we see either the free will is evoked, consciously utilized, or every interpretation of the world would just be like unknown movement, which would equate into divine will if you personalize it. The child opens its eyes in through various programs. Some of these programs, it all has to do how life is exposed and how life is articulated. What that means is every child, like if Jordan Peterson speaks well about this, I mean, in some sense, every child has a sort of pattern of behavior developed in accordance to what experiences in its life, in its lifetime, it gets access to first. I've kind of defined this in a way where it's as if the first wave of information that hits you as you open your eyes, not per se purely as a blank slate, as a tabula rasa, but in some sense a sort of opportunity to experience novelty regardless of how you awaken. So the mind has to do with on and off kind of switch like of experiences and subjective realities. I can say that it's like just like how you see in a binary kind of language 0 1 0 1 0 1. It's like behind my eyes this river of thought that I speak of, that I kind of see. I'm seeing a film. Of course it's not constant, it's in some sense rhythmic. It's as if like my mind is alive and it's breathing as I'm thinking. Do you know? It's as if so there's a gap between the thoughts as simply the body and the heartbeat in some sense projects that rhythm. I'm just saying that the species is not wondering about what's behind its eyes as much as it's wondering about what's in front of its eyes, which just creates a greater curiosity in human beings to wonder about what's beyond. You know, I sometimes thought like just I saw a playful moment where I was just like it was at the end of a talk and I'm like, okay, you know, I was in a park and I'm like, what if somebody came here and asked me like, what's your philosophy, man? And you know, I was like, okay. And I thought playfully in that moment something like beyondism, you know, and I don't know if something like that exists, but I thought like a playful way of saying it's like unknownism. It's too unknown. Where is the value of life? That question is so profound because you may suddenly be looking for something in life, like so many people are doing certain external things to get internal permissions. That means their ethical morality is based on how the world treats them and how they treat the world. If they treat the world wrong, their moral structure begins to collapse behind them. You know, we do what we can before the light of the candle goes out. That's the human game. And Mr. Within is simply pointing out that there's an 4 billion year old kind of civilization here. Maybe we should do something about it. Maybe the human beings, maybe all the minds of human beings must now begin not just studying their own inner realm. Imagine what kind of awesome civilization would this be, where it's as if imagination was not banished and exiled from the kingdoms of rationality. And rationality said the most rational thing is to wonder about the newest update, which would mean to wonder about the newest potential. So imagination is suddenly accepted in the rational kingdom. The simplest way of kind of, I guess, concluding the moment is that it's attention oscillating between known states of mind, familiar states of mind, recognizable pattern, and unknown states of mind. And when you really conquer that fear of the unknown, knowledge no longer becomes a limitation. So you kind of realize there was never anything such as knowledge, guys. It was just that there's eyes that are open and they're seeing something. And the more the human will has the nobility of the scholar, this is why scholars weren't saints, but they had a sort of nobility. They, even though they externally they were like, you know, not in the battlefields, but in some sense, psychologically, they had to confront a sort of weight. Because the thing is, when you care for something, you automatically become responsible for it, whether you know it or not, you know? And so when you care for something and that automatic responsibility arises, that automatic responsibility has now to come back to the immediate tribe of emotions and explain its new finding. So you got to think of it this way. It's like not only do you have access to what we, at least for now, are calling memory, I'm going to give a totally new talk, and in that talk, I'm going to attempt to redefine or redesign this view we have on memory kind of being like this file cabinet. I want to break the file cabinet of memory and use that what's there to build something else. It's like you use the ruler to build something completely different than the ruler. We use measurement, we use linearity, but we acknowledge it as a dimension. You see, it's kind of like imagine the different possibilities that arise just by how the person treats the impression they have from the world. Sorry, guys, I needed a quick intermission there. You know, they asked this guy, do you forget the time often? And the guy says, no, time forgets me. I find myself in attempting to bring order to my subjective vision, realizing that truly a dynamic state cannot be interpreted. Do you know what that means? That means I we are not just electrons in the void. We're not just atoms in the void. We're not just cells in the void. We're not just bodies in the void. We're not just minds in the void. We are not just the unknown in the void. We're not just the ultimate knowledge in the void. The void is the void. The ultimate resolution, the confrontation of an existential position that you're like, when you get realize emptiness is the natural state, then life's fulfillment becomes celebrity in the rhythm of a sort of celebration evoked. So what I can say is that the most profoundest states of mind, or like literally moments I've had where I've realized something, in those moments what has happened is a sort of overall value system of the whole moment has shifted. And when the overall shifts, the archetype cannot remain the same. You can say an archetype is like this machine, or it's like this Iron Man suit, where in the Iron Man suit, emotions from the past, memories from the past, the current memory generation of the moment, and the kind of projection of the future. It's like all of these find themselves in the same moment. You see, it's a reunion of all dimensions with where they're all standing. The animation of reality can, of course, we can endlessly write science fiction novels. We can endlessly make civilization look science fiction like. But to truly understand the mystery of nature means man has to return to nature. What that means is, I have this vision, guys, that really we should build our cities above trees, and the whole earth should be covered with trees. Do you see? And we're just living above these trees. Just think about that. That means we're like, all right, instead of kind of replacing nature with concrete, let's instead go and live above the trees somehow. So, what I find is like the whole species should invest in technology that allows us to kind of get lift off from, like, I don't know, more than, like, I don't know, like 200 meters from the surface of the earth. So I feel that our cities are meant to literally, like, bubbles at, like, in a boiling kettle, like, just kind of when they're ready, kind of move towards the surface. The programs of nature, that what are the options? You accept it, you don't accept it, you watch it, you don't watch it, you shape it, you don't shape it, you know it, you don't know it. The dualistic hamster wheel can endlessly turn, guys. But in while the hamster wheel is running in this thing, the hamster wheel is like, all right, it's getting boring in here, and steps out. Boredom is the savior of the hamster and the hamster. The explorer's vision. Ask yourself any uh what was that great vision? It's like as if, like, I find, with great there's a great strength that there comes the continuity of genetical design. Vision, that strength comes from vision, because there's a sort of subconscious fear of, again, a reaction to emptiness. Man has to tell himself a story, because it's like he feels he's a candle alone in a room. But it's like, as Rumi the poet says, this candle, this consciousness is not alone in the room. It's actually right there where the sunlight is hitting it, and the sunlight is infusing the light of the candle with it. So what it means, it's like a merge. It's like consciousness returns to its original state, which is before language even touched it. So you're just present being. So that's when you find ultimate contentment with just being present as a being. It literally means you're like slowing down. But of course, let's entertain the pilot mentality. Guys, I feel the title is a bit too raw. Rise of a New Mind. No, the title's fine, actually. So, guys, I thought of doing something interesting. In 2016, I went on what I call like a poetry spree. It's like it's as if I wrote a lot of kind of rhythmic sentences. I'm gonna just read for you a random poem. I'm just gonna see. Um, so I'm gonna choose 10 out of 12. So I'm going to read you from this poetry collection, this poetry book I wrote. It has 31 poems in it. You know, I'm just bragging to my future self, not to anyone else. So, out of this 31, let's go with a random number. Let's go 22. Let's see. So, this poem I wrote on September 7th, 2016 at 23:28, and it's all recorded here, guys. Fascinating. So this poem is called Before Destruction. I kind of wrote this in a way where, um, like a dancer, kind of dissolved in the moment, per se, not linearly analyzing the moment, but in a sort of emotional expression. So I could say that this is kind of freestyle poetry that I wrote, but it's kind of existential oriented. So, anyways, the poem is called Before Destruction. Once I was in a fight with my reflection. At the end of such a personal war, it seemed that the mirror in between was left broken. Some buy new cars, others require to deal with their karma. What does it mean when life is mean? The warrior within has already held the sword. But who brought the weapon into the battlefield? They have said your worst enemy is yourself. But who can fight the clay of thought before it breaks? There are many wonders in this world. But how does the world wonder about its own truth? Can the axis of destruction be the same axis of creation in the maintenance of Vishnu's house? Can a poet write a poem beyond belief? The only war that requires a general to command is the remembrance of the absolute within the heart of man. We are all warriors in disguise, ready to fight ourselves. A blade must fall and only be picked up by the ground. Stop the fight of eons and love the clarity that allows. Before warfare, wonder if your shoes could be replaced with the other. I have hurt this world only to see I have hurt myself. Before destruction, see the beauty of creation. That's the end of the poem, guys. The poem's called Before Destruction. To be honest, when I was writing these poetry, I was experiencing like a visual experience behind my eyes. The visual realm of my inner sight wasn't always open. I notice it's something that the more you care about your intelligence, the more you like your intelligence just trusts life. When it trusts life, its intelligence can your intelligence can apply. So think of this, that most people's intelligence has nothing to do with their kind of neurology per se. It has to do with how the attention orchestrates the various values in the moment, and an ability to shift attention and realize how really what life is like we are creatures that put boxes over our heads, and we go and we are constantly making business deals. Imagine a world where everybody had a box on their head, nobody could see each other's true self, and in some sense they are constantly in doing business, only to realize if they took off the boxes, then they would see a reality, a common reality where even the concept of business transforms into an ethical means to the exploration of education. I feel that all our jobs should be focused on the exploration of existence rather than just maintenance of labor. Like, I understand labor is crucial, we need to have some sort of objective purpose, but I feel as a species, as a civilization, we have an ability to, using some sort of virtual reality plus some sort of obstacle course, to keep the human body active in more efficient ways. So what it is we can in some sense create, take the hardest problems of our world, may turn them into virtual reality games, and have these virtual reality games also require physical movement of the human being in a sort of maintainable space. And so I'm kind of attempting to notice that the species, it's like whether we like it or not, it's like literally the caterpillar turns to the butterfly. It's like it's not your choice when if you see something more than it is. It's like the moment is beyond choice. It's too instantaneous for there to even be a choice. For some reason, guys, I get a feeling to read another poem from the same poetry collection called Garden of Change. This poem, I don't know why, I just feel I should read it. It's called Be Kind to Your Shadow. All right. Be kind to your shadow. The poem begins to breathe. Once the darkness in the room began reminiscing about the light that had brightened the one truth. Do not be cruel to the women of this world, for mankind must never lose its hope. Rejected by the world, all men are warriors from within. Do not become harsh, because that's just the way it is. Love is the ruler of all realms, and it never needs to measure the life that lives. What is meant by this passage? That there is only one passage through the void that breaks all norm. My beloved being, in the darkest times, be the light. Greatness means you are kind, even to your shadow. And the poem ends there, guys. And that's it, guys. We got to learn to be able to see that that greater external thing that the ego's desires, it's like we negotiate our egos into realizing uh, one conscious moment of intelligence is much better than a fragmented sort of constant need to keep a sort of spectrum of psychological value all the time. You see, it's like the brain chemistry of every human being changes way too often to have the same thought. Just the fact that we can acknowledge the world is the reason is because we're having, like, again, an on and off kind of switch in the psychology of the person. We don't realize it what we are blinking. When the human being blinks, just what is happening for a second, the whole visual sense is gone. So it's like what's happening, it's like, again, on off, on off, on off. So this, we realize we're creatures that are in some sense the consciousness is a sort of rhythm between observable and, unobservable, and non-observable appears as a movement to it, as if something's moving it. The observable is something in the domain that the consciousness feels, or a moment feels it can move. And guys, I feel we're reaching our destination for this talk. To be aware of the programs of nature, just how reality is emerging into meaning. And you can free yourself from subjective engagement. What I mean by that is language worship. Language worship is like holding a painting in front of your face. Anyways, guys, to end the talk, the rise of a new mind means the exploration of the human vision, um, rather than avoiding what constitutes as imagination, whatever that is, or any sort of parallel potential to the reality. It's as if the scientist allows the theoretical physicist to talk about parallel dimensions, but when it comes from a religious context, it's like butchered. So it's what I'm saying is, it's like language is evolving, so is the behavior and psychology of the human being. What is fundamentally happening in this evolution is more acknowledgement of the environment. So you see, so what I'm saying is, like, listen, look at how advanced the human being is. It's so advanced that it's not only been able to find contentment in observance of its object, of its moment, but now it's wondering about the beyond. In this Zen story, a warlord gets so enraged by monks. And this warlord declares and says to all his men that you are all to kill every monk you see. And so all the monks in the monasteries at the time were like, oh my God, this is messed up, you know? And so the young monks, who were young, like, you can say foolish, foolish souls, not foolish minds, but like foolish souls. They in some sense ran into the mountains to be in a sort of safe haven. Sometimes I look at this changing universe and I'm like, I want to pat it on the back and be like, take a rest, buddy. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Um, I hope that it's just from this talk you've realized the importance of studying nature. And honestly, like I guess I'll finish the Zen story, but it's gonna add another 10 minutes to the talk. All right. Angry warlord gets to one town, sees there's this old monk who none of the soldiers want to kill because he's just chilling on the grass, simply meditating. So none of the soldiers want to kill him or something. And the warlord's like, "What is this?" And his assistant says, "This is the situation." And the warlord gets so angry that he just forgets. He's like, "I'll deal with the assistant later who has disobeyed." And he grips the handle of his sword with such intensity as if he's about to like literally use his sword. And he walks up and he sees the monk is sitting down, and it's like this monk, this older monk. And so the warlord says, "Monk, stand up." And the monk gently stands up. And the warlord then goes closer, and says to the monk very loudly, "Do you know who I am?" And the monk is silent. He says, "Do you know who I am?" It's like, imagine the warlord's like, actually, like, "Do you know who I am?" I'm like, "I don't know who I am." The warlord says, "Do you know who I am? I can have my sword in your stomach in an instant." As if he's in such a state of rage where he's like, "I can instantly turn you into non-existence." And then he says, "I can have my blade in your stomach in an instant." And in that moment, the Zen master's like, "Yo, this is messed up." Sorry, guys, I'm being too silly. The Zen master looks at this warlord, this young soul, and says, "Do you know who I am? I can have your sword in my stomach in an instant." And there's a sudden shock, as if the whole warlord's entourage are like, "Holy shit." The warlord is about to unleash his sword, but he suddenly sees he can't. And it's as if what the Zen master said is sinking in. This is like where the moral of the story shows itself, guys. That he said, "I can have your sword in a stomach in an instant," and fearlessly, with strange, kind of eternal, fearless eyes. The Zen master looked at this warlord. And the warlord realized that there are some things, regardless of what others or the world does, it cannot be taken away. It is not remembering your presence, it is your presence remembering itself. We graduate from God games. I feel like the deed of the night has been done, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Um, I recommend everybody to write. I don't know. I feel it's like you have one opportunity. It's like start this write, and you'll realize soon, kind of like the significance of why there's a mind here, why there's an attention, why consciousness is unexplainable because it is the one asking the question. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and namaste.